So soon after New York legalized marijuana in 2021, and well before any legal licensed cannabis dispensaries opened, a new kind of shop began popping up all around town, colonizing many storefronts left empty by the pandemic. In 2022, Herb dubbed these stores weed bodegas, describing the fly-by-night business as part of a smoke shop, part convenience store, part dispensary, all packaged in the aesthetic of a Monster Energy drink. Beyond their illegality, garnishes, and questionable product, weed bodegas have undermined cannabis entrepreneurs who are trying to follow the rules, many of which have navigated tangles of red tape and extended delays to the open legal dispensaries, and are still doing so. The bureaucratic chaos has put a blemish on New York's pioneering attempt to prioritize racial and gender diversity, as well as those previously convicted of marijuana-related offenses in its licensing program. Almost since Weed Bodega's inception, the city, the New York Office of Cannabis Management, which is the OCM, which regulates marijuana sales, have been talking about cracking down on them, yet they're as thick as the ground as ever. Thick as ever on the ground. Lawmakers are now speaking with more urgency. Governor Kathy Hochul recently called for the state's cannabis rollout a disaster and has proposed legislation that would grant the OCM more power to shut down illegal businesses. I spoke with Chris Alexander, the executive director of the agency, about the difficulty of closing some of the illegal shops, and he's glad police aren't more involved in enforcement and what's around the corner for legal weed in New York. Sounds like the dogs are chiming in.
Yeah. You're good. Keep going, Dr. Mark. Keep going. Don't worry about that.
Okay, so, hey, get over here, guys. Okay. So here's the first of many questions, and I'll just go through a few of these for brevity's sake. Why are there so many of these shops still around after 3 years? And Chris's answer to that question is, that's a good question. Since the proliferation began, we decided to take it on. This was not the initial design of our office, not the initial function of the office. We knew that there would be some illegal activity or illicit sales, but what was happening in every other market. But this is New York, so it's more. Everything in New York is more, right? At the beginning of this, I would attribute the delay in response to the folks who would normally engage in this type of enforcement to education. We had to remind law enforcement, for example, that yes, we legalized, the condition for being a legal business is that you are licensed, just like with the New York State Liquor Authority. So if you're engaged in activity without a license, the same penal law offenses apply. Those offenses are still on the books. But I think there was a greater shift of expectation from the wider communities and local leaders, etc., that the entity that would be regulating the plant would also step in a way that the SLA, which is the State Liquor Authority, doesn't for illegal cannabis shops. So we stepped in. Like any law enforcement mechanism shifts from criminal to civil, there are challenges. It is still criminal activity, but we are taking on enforcement action. And in doing so, we passed the first law to give ourselves the authority to take this action, because the original law did not give us the authority over the unlicensed shop, despite anyone's imagination. Then we had to pass regulations and create a hearing process, create controls around the plants that are being seized, develop penalties, hire people. This was something that we were doing. It's frustrating to the point where people can probably hear it in my tone a little bit. And then the reporter asked, yeah, and you could hear it from my questions that I am somewhat confused. And I think that this is widespread about who is enforcing the rules here and who has the power to enforce them. And Chris responded saying, well, I'll say we're doing it. A lot of smoke shops are presenting themselves as smoke shops, and the city sheriff has control and authority over those selling tobacco products, so we've engaged in the process. District attorneys have not been prosecuting cannabis offenses generally, but they have been helping to facilitate landlords kicking people out who are engaging in the activity. The Department of Tax and Finance, which has a role with us in doing these investigations, is involved, and everyone's doing a little bit, but largely the OCM has been taking this on. Then the reporter asks, it seems like there's been a classic New York City problem of agency coordination, with 5 different entities, probably referring to the 5 different boroughs, have a role in maintaining something together, but they're less effective than a single entity with all those combined powers. Then Chris responded saying, I wouldn't say that exactly because we've all been in coordination. I think the problem at the start was who owns it. Because, to be very frank, in the back of my mind, I was asking why law enforcement hadn't done anything over the last 40 years to an excessive level in certain communities. The reporter responded by saying, fair question. Then Chris said, I spent a long time just basically saying what left penal law offenses on the books. Why are people not getting arrested for these offenses? Once we get over and we just accept the fact that this is a shift from criminal to civil enforcement action, now it's on us. I wouldn't say it's a lack of coordination. It's just the fact that we have to build on the rules of that civil engagement because this hasn't existed before. In the beginning, I would often say, well, they're not just breaking the cannabis laws by selling without a license, they're breaking municipal laws. They're also breaking penal and tax laws. And the reporter asked, why do you think police would be so hesitant in taking action? It seems unlike them, as you said. And Chris answered, I would say it's a big shift. When we legalized, people had to adjust to just what that meant. Just because you're not going to go after the low-level person smoking a joint. The roles change. Roles have changed. I think it's just because it's education and more of an adjustment in that way. I would say that the NYPD and local law enforcement agencies across the state have helped with sites, maintaining site control and safety. So I do appreciate that support. But yeah, it's a re-education. I think we were people first who don't recognize how much of this has happened. We shifted significantly since the population, since legalization in terms of our public policy, so it doesn't take time for people to adjust. So I'm going to scroll down to like the last question that he asks here. So there's a bunch of questions and back and forth on this, but I won't take up any more time than to just say the reporter's last question, which was, I'm from Massachusetts, where we legalized weed in 2016. And you're right, it's going to take a few years to get smooth operations up and running everywhere, but they did it there in a more standard way. And then Chris responded by saying, the big difference, and I don't want to disparage other regulators, but different methods have tried to ensure diversity in the market. And I think the truth of the matter is, in order to ensure diversity, you have to license more diverse people. We, speaking of New York now, made this a priority and we led with this. We didn't say, okay, there's a program and an office that's going to focus on ensuring these people have access. No, we said that we have to go there first. And I think it frustrated folks, obviously. But what I'm seeing now in the market is we have already the most diverse market in the country, even with just only 7 retailers and 270 farmers that we have. Again, it's going to take some time to fully ramp up, but we have a lot of dispensaries to get open. But a lot of businesses are doing well. We have some time, some of the top dispensaries in the country right here in New York. It's just time. It's just time, he's saying. That's the real biggest variable here. The time that's taken to do this in the right way has frustrated folks, but at the same time, I'm very excited about the outlook for 2024. So you could read more of this back and forth between this New York magazine reporter and Chris Alexander, the director of the OCM. But I think what you're going to find, again, is a very common theme, which is that, yeah, I don't think they realized that the trap was as strong as it was. I mean, I don't know. It is something that is going to take some time to basically get a level playing field to where the licensed producers in New York are going to be able to share some of that market. But this is, I think, what we've always kind of said here on High at 9, which is as long as there's prohibition everywhere, there'll be a trap market everywhere. Or as long as there's prohibition anywhere, there'll be a trap market everywhere. So this is Dr. Mark from the great state of Vermont. I'd be interested in what all you have to say about this. This is something we've talked about quite a bit here on High at 9. That, you know, it's a formidable challenge to snuff out the trap.
Yeah, I mean, this just proves, Dr. Mark, that identity politics don't work. Because they tried basing their whole program based off identity politics, and their whole program is probably the biggest catastrophe that we've seen any municipality incorporate in cannabis as to date.
Well, how did they do this in Los Angeles? I mean, I think Los Angeles is certainly a bellwether for New York City.
They did it by zip codes.
Yeah.
They did it by zip codes.
But let me ask something. So there was a trap market that existed in kind of like the smoke shop convenience store format that they were able to kind of get their hands on or kind of convert those into dispensaries? Or
no, I think it was different here. While you were reading that, Dr. Mark, I was thinking back to the years 16 to 18 here in California, which was the time, you know, it was passed in 16, but it went into effect in 2018. And I just don't remember any of us being so concerned about the trap or smoke shops or unlicensed businesses. Obviously, we're California. We have a lot of traditional market here, but we really, I don't think there's as much focus on it because there were so many more licensed retailers. I'm sorry, did that article say 7 licensed retailers?
Yeah, they're propping up 7 licensed retailers, thinking that's going to slow down the trap at all in New York. And I think one of the big differences between New York and Los Angeles too, Dr. Mark, is the compression, the size. You know, Los Angeles is extremely spread out as far as a landmass, and New York is extremely condensed, and so therefore people see it a lot more every day when they're just walking just through the streets, as opposed to, you know, you could walk a couple miles in LA and not see a trap store, even though they're all over the place. I think
it was 70 at least, not 7. So 70 retailers and 270 farmers.
Even 70, and they're talking about the whole state of New York for 70.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
And in California, like, you got to know someone to go to the traditional market or, you know, have a plug, right? And then there's the trap shops or, you know, wherever they are, but they're not like in your face like every other store or corner, like, you know, New York. And I think there were so many other big retailers opening, you know, a lot more than 70.
Prior to those licensed prior to those licensed retailers opening and becoming, you know, dispensaries available for people, was there a kind of like a trap smoke shop in LA?
There was tons of trap smoke shops in LA.
Well,
you know, and then
they were medical though.
They were the collectives.
Collective.
Yeah, there was all trap shops. Those were all trap shops. Those were they were not registered as nonprofits, Dr. T. 90% of them were not registered as that. They were just out there trapping, getting it, taking advantage of the loose regulations and lack of enforcement that were going on in California.
That's right, but it was the best way to do it because we used a funnel approach. New York could have left all the bodegas open and let them be quasi-legal and then slowly start introducing regulations. But they came in and really squeezed down tightly, and which didn't allow, which created a large illegal market. It's really the the government's fault there.
You're 100% right, Dr. T. And, we have to be 100% honest when we're having this conversation. I think another thing that perpetuates this whole trappiness going on in New York is the proliferation of products like Delta 8, Delta 9, HHC, THCO,
and tobacco.
All of these products.
To be honest, quite what opened the door, Jason, was the nicotine vape shops. And now all of a sudden they started carrying Delta 8 and HHC and all these other things.
Yeah.
And the other thing which is kind of quaint about New York, and I don't know if this exists in Los Angeles, is you can go into your local deli and get a sandwich. You can pick up a newspaper. You can maybe pick up a few groceries, and you can get a bag of weed. So it's not just a smoke shop. I mean, yeah, do they sell pipes and bongs and do that? They have that, but they have nice sandwiches. There's loaves of bread.
Imagine
if you
going
need to
into
pick up a box of Pop-Tarts to bring home, you could bring home a box of Pop-Tarts. But they're just convenience stores, and I think from the convenience store mentality, these folks know, and they're often like Asian, like Indian, and things like that. They know that, hey, people want to buy this. I'm going to sell it because I can make money. And someone who's going to come into my shop to buy a sandwich and buy this and buy that, now I'm going to bundle everything that guy buys and throw a little weed in there. Yeah, why not?
Yep.
So it's... Yeah, I mean, I don't know if those kinds of shops ever existed in LA, did they?
Yeah, we have those. We have liquor stores where you can buy sandwiches and shit like that. Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Sandwiches, bag of weed, bottle of booze.
I mean, you can buy. I mean, you could probably buy other stuff in them too if you ask the right questions. But nonetheless, we got to go to a commercial. We're gonna be right back.